Yeah, hello, Nest listeners. Thanks so much for joining us on the program again. We were so overwhelmed, Drew, by the Derby win. We just needed a week to just let it all settle down. We couldn't quite get our emotions together. So we had the Gold Coast game and we thought we'd take stock of everything after that, mate. It's been a fun few weeks.
It's been awesome, Garby. Obviously tempered by the loss on Sunday, but mitigating circumstances. And yeah, I don't know if I said this after the win against Richmond, but I just feel like I'm a proper footy fan again, and I'm able to enjoy watching my team play. And yeah, I know the Western Derby feels like a long time ago now, but jumping out of your seat and celebrating some pretty awesome moments and getting genuinely excited, not just for the now, but for the future as well. That was a pretty cool ride. We hadn't won a Derby for a while, so that was a fair bit of enjoyment came from that. And then be able to just bask in a little bit of that glory for a little while has been a lot of fun. And then, a little bit of a reality check maybe against the Suns, but, it's always a tough trip up there and with a couple of key players out. So we get ready for an assault on Essendon on Saturday night.
Yeah, just the one bad quarter against Gold Coast. The Derby was just unreal. It's an odd feeling to be in as a supporter as well, though, in our current state. So I was watching the Gold Coast game on the weekend and obviously loved the way we start, and then it gets into a bit of an arm wrestle. They blow us away. And my wife was on the couch while I was watching and she's like, how come you're not screaming? Usually you're going nuts. Usually you're going bad. Why aren't you? And I said, good question. I think because we won a couple of games recently and we've shown that we are competitive now, it's a bit odd in the state that we're in, that I don't go nuts for a game like Gold Coast. Like if we lose, I'm disappointed, but it's almost like the pressure's off a little bit. Like we're not expected to be a top 8 side, but we're not an embarrassment anymore. We're not going to win every game. We kind of know that. We feel confident about beating Essendon this week, but we can handle a defeat away to Gold Coast a little bit now as a supporter base because of what's happened the last couple of weeks. So that's kind of how I felt, where my emotions were at. Do you kind of get where I'm coming from in that sense?
It's so funny that you say that because I experienced something quite similar. I got home from a couple of nights away in Bright, which is about 3.5 hours away from Melbourne. So I watched the game on a slight delay, and when Gold Coast pushed ahead, my partner even said, I'm going to sit down and watch, and I know how passionate you are, yada, yada. She's not really into footy that much. And when they kicked away, I was like fairly calm, but just sort of made this comment where I was like, well, we're definitely not going to win today, are we? But was just, unfazed by it. And she was like, oh, I thought you'd be much more annoyed than this. But it was like, no, well, yeah, the feeling, it's different. The frustration I feel, or the frustration we felt in recent times, it's sort of a little bit alleviated because we've seen something closer to the ceiling. We've seen like what we're capable of. We've seen promise. So it's like, I know that I know we're heading the right way.
Yeah.
So I can deal with the troughs because I've seen the peaks.
Yeah. And we just know that we're going to be competitive most weeks now. I think that's the comforting feeling.
Yeah.
Last season it was being embarrassed over and over. It was just devastating. You actually couldn't watch because you just couldn't handle it. Our partners and our family and our friends could see, the embarrassment and devastation. We've got over that hill, but we also know we're not going to win every week, so we can handle defeats. Whereas when you're a top team and you lose, it really hurts because you feel like you should win every game. So it's that awkward spot that we're in, I think, as a supporter base, but it's a much better place than where we were obviously last season. And it's not like we don't want to win. I mean, I'm going into Essendon this week, so pumped up for Saturday night, like Harley back, Tommy B back, a team that is up and down a little bit. We can win this game. Like, I actually think we will win this game. Like, I'm so excited for Saturday night. Cannot wait to watch, and will be disappointed if we aren't like right in it until the end, because, okay, we had that little dip last week. Let's get back to that big crowd pumping, players doing awesome things, Harley bursting out of the middle. Let's get back to that this week. That's kind of the emotional journey that we're on.
Well, we get that excitement now all the time because we have a player like Harley Reid. We've got Elliot Yeo back in form. That's freed up Tim Kelly. Jake Waterman's kicked more goals in the last 3 weeks than he's ever kicked in a season. Like, all of a sudden, we're getting all these little things to hold on to. And, my friends have all said the same things to me, where they're excited to watch us play now. They're looking forward to the game. And now people in the office are stopping me and wanting to talk to me about Harley and about how they're watching the Eagles play now. And it's a totally different feeling. And I think it's right for us to have expectation that we can win the game on Saturday night. I think Essendon seemed like a pretty good team. I feel like they're almost built to beat the teams below them and then, have a crack against the top teams, but they're probably not quite good enough to beat them. So it'll be a really good test for us. But yeah, and I think you spoke about how you're not going to get angry about a loss away to the Gold Coast. Like, there's not a lot of historical relevance for us to get excited about with the Gold Coast Suns, but we've had a great rivalry with Essendon for almost the entirety of our history. And there's been some really big games, some huge moments between the teams. I think about Nick Nat throwing Zach Merritt into the advertising hoardings after he pulled his hair, and, the James Hird goal at Marvel Stadium. We've played in a couple of big finals. They've embarrassed us at Windy Hill where we kicked one goal, I think, on a wet and windy day. There's heaps of layers, Kevin Sheedy jacket waving and the crossing of the throat to Mitchell White. So that gets me excited. If we have a good start, we might be waving the jackets early on at Optus Stadium with 55,000 in the house. So there's a lot to get excited about.
Most certainly. So what were your major takeouts out of the Gold Coast game? Was there anything that sort of stood out to you positively, negatively that, we go into Essendon to look out for this week? Well,
the concern was just that we got beaten up a bit around the ball. And obviously they have some great stoppage players, but it was noticeable Jared Witts had control on the ruck, and Raul, Anderson, Tuke Miller were able to, and Will Graham in there, were able to really do a number on us around the ball. So Elliot Yeo felt like he was probably fighting a bit of a lone hand, and he started the game so strongly and was dominating. Tim Kelly was a bit down, and then we missed not having Harley in there, of course. So that was my big concern, was that we were getting beaten up around the ball. And it made me think, geez, I can't wait to have Matt Flynn to give Bailey a bit of a chop out.
Yeah.
And then I guess it probably showed how impactful Reid has been for us. He clearly makes Kelly a better player. It frees him up a little bit, and then it gives Yo a running mate, as we've talked about last week. There was a couple of times where Yo got out the front of the stoppage. They even cut to Damien Hardwick, who was banging the table, getting mad about it because they'd obviously discussed it. But having two players in there capable of doing that will make a big difference for us against Essendon, because I think, Merritt's in great form. Parrish has been better the last couple of weeks. And then Caldwell's probably having his career best season. So they've got a bit of depth through the midfield. So and Durham probably plays on Yo. So that's an area we probably need to fix up. Ground ball, contested ball, clearances is something that Simo's talked about a lot as something he wants to improve on. And that was the first time that we've really fallen down in that area. So hopefully we're not tiring and we're not going to continue to flag in that part of the game, because it's been a big plus for us so far this year.
Yeah, only two players above 20 possessions, Duggan and Tommy Cole. Yowie started superbly, and then, as you say, didn't have enough of a help, and Tim Kelly had one of his down games. Petch was great, 14, a goal, 10 tackles for Petch. So his excellent form's continuing. We know about Jake the Snake, and, mate, imagine he wins the Coleman. I could just, what happened? Let me ask you before I go on to some of the other players. When Oscar does come back, how do you play the two together? So Oscar plays centre half forward or plays out of a pocket? Jake ain't moving from the square.
No, I don't think you're not going to move Jake from what he's doing. It's just a question of how fit Oscar's going to be. But, I'm not concerned about it, because having, what we think is a future superstar of the game in Oscar Allen alongside now an emerging forward, it just sounds like it's we're doubling our money here. So, I think they don't need to change too much about what Jake's doing, because he's playing great footy. Hopefully, the two of them together just becomes an even more formidable duo.
Yeah, I guess the hope is that Oscar's got the tank straight away and his knee's okay, that he can maybe play up the ground, play centre half forward and get up the wings. I guess that poses the question, what happens to Jack Darling? If Flynn comes back as well and they play Bailey Williams forward, is that the start of Jack Darling being eased out of the team a little bit, potentially, especially with Ryan Marrick down there as a link man who's looking good in that role? We're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's a question they'll be posing at the moment. But if Oscar can't get up the ground as much, then perhaps he just plays in a pocket and stays a bit closer to home around Jake, who's just dominating at the moment. Yeah, Ruben, I mean, only 12 possessions from him in a game where he needed to step up more in the absence of Harley Reid. That's a bit disappointing. Luke Edwards, just a 9 touches. I think a lot of supporters were surprised Luke Edwards came straight back in. I think Simo and the coaching staff are just keen to get some of the youngsters back into the fold straight away. And he said a few times, if it's a 50-50 call between a youngster and an older player, the youngster's getting the nod. They like Luke Edwards. That's great. I thought he was a bit lucky to come straight back. He hadn't really done much prior to his week off. So that's an interesting one. They seem to like him a lot. But geez, the body of work there this season is not quite there. And then Chess subbed out again, 6 disposals. Tyler Brockman only 4. He needed to provide a lot more, 4 tackles for Brockman at least. But Chess is in some trouble, it feels. It may be kind of one of those get back to the waffle and get some touches up and some confidence up before you get back to AFL level. He's a bit inconsistent. He has a really good quarter and then he falls away again and does something silly. He's just, the confidence is teetering on the edge quite a lot, it feels, Drewy.
Symptomatic of where his footy's at, really, isn't it? You know, lots of injuries in his development year, COVID and a lack of continuity with actually playing footy. He just feels like he's a bit behind. So, yeah, I mean, we have to persist with him, and that's the beauty of what we're doing right now, is that we're trying to find out about these players. But if Elijah Hewitt was fit and Jai Cully wasn't coming off an ACL, like would these guys be in the team? Would Edwards and Chester be playing? Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, yeah, Hewitt would definitely be in. Cully's an interesting one. It's hard to know how they feel about Cully. Like, you never get any major endorsements on him from the coaches, but at the same time, he's played more often than not and he's looked pretty good. Where do you think they sit on him? I can't quite get a read. Well,
I mean, I could understand that they want to give him a few weeks to get his confidence back in his body coming off the ACL. And so I assume that they'll be ready to launch him into the team and give him a chance to show what he can do when the time is right. So I think that's coming. There's players who you can see in the 22, 23 that can easily be rotated out, and for Cully to come in, it's so hard to comment on how he's going at waffle level because we just don't get to see them play. So his possessions are modest, but I assume he's playing sort of limited game time. So I'm excited to see how he goes when he comes back into the team. And I suppose he probably plays sort of a high half forward, mixing in some CBA sort of role, I would assume. He's kicked 4 goals in a game for us before, and we've seen him come in and lay 10, 12 tackles as well. So he's got the ability to do both. So I think it's a matter of time until he gets a chance. I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but I would play Zane True this week in place of Edwards. I think True's performed for the Waffle Eagles in the last few weeks, and I think he deserves to be rewarded for that. I mean, you can talk about maybe his limitations as a player, but at the moment, he's one that's actually getting it done down at that level. So I'd like to see him. If we're going to give him another contract, we may as well reward him for the form.
Yeah, for sure. I know there's some listener questions, so we'll get to those in a moment. But just breaking away from the weekend and looking ahead to Essendon for a moment. So some reports in the last 24 hours that we're into Jack Graham. I thought that was an interesting one, Drewy.
Where would he fit in? I wanted to talk about trade stuff. So, I mean, for me, I don't see why we would get Jack Graham, but I'm happy. Why? I'm happy for you to disagree.
Look, I think he's a good player, but I'm not a massive rap on the move just because he's injured a lot. Firstly, he misses a lot of footy.
Yep.
He's a good contest player. Yes, he bridges that gap between our youngsters and our older players. Like, you can play him on ball, half forward a little bit. Jaden Hunt's added a fair bit to the team. If you get him for nothing, then okay. I just don't look at it and think, well, where does he improve us massively? We look at our young players coming through. How big of an influence is it going to have in our playing group? I don't quite see it. Liam Baker, obviously, yes. Jack Graham, don't know. Not so sure. If he gets fully fit and up and going, well, then great. But I'm just not sure he will. Like, it just seems like his body seems to fail him a fair bit. It certainly has over the last couple of years. No,
not for me. He's a good role player in a contending team. And I mean, he played a grand final in his 4th or 5th game, kicked 3 goals. There's not too many games he's played since then that I can really remember. And I've watched plenty of Richmond over the years. So Not for me. I was interested by the Liam Baker reports. So there is some conflicting stuff. So Tom Morris reports that Fremantle are ahead, and then Ralphie reports last night that West Coast is slightly ahead. He's suggesting the split of the first pick and then trading sort of a mid to late first rounder for Baker. And obviously it'll be a fairly enticing salary package for Bakes to come to West Coast. I think the more logical fit is for him at Freo, given they've got 3 first rounders. But I would love to have Liam Baker at West Coast. Would you be happy to give up, say, a pick, 15 to 18 for Liam Baker?
I think that's where he sits. I think 15's kind of the maximum. I think he's, back end of the first round.
Yeah, which probably becomes 18 with all the stuff that goes on.
Any lower than 15 and you're giving up a bit much.
Yeah.
I think for a player who's already into, he's past 25. So, I mean, look, the West Coast fan aspect hopefully helps us a little bit, tug on the heartstrings. That might get the deal done for us. We might have a bit more money to offer potentially. Freo obviously closer to challenging again. So that could be a factor in his mind as well. It's going to be an interesting one. He feels like a player who's going to move, and it makes sense for Richmond as well to cash in on him as they try and semi-rebuild. But, that's the one that gets you excited. Jack Graham, a bit ho-hum.
So the question here, sorry, I was supposed to mute that cough before, so apologies to the listeners for that. Now, it's enticing to get Liam Baker to the club. Is it going to be worthwhile in the long run, do you think, to say split our pick 4 into pick 11 and pick 17 or whatever, however it all shakes down? Is that going to be the right move for us long term, do you think? Or would you rather take the gun youngster at pick 4 and sort of put our eggs in that basket, or look at a later pick and then bring in Liam Baker and use some of our salary cap?
I guess it all comes down to the draft, right? And it's very hard for us to discuss that from our position, or anyone's really at this stage of the season. Yeah. You've got to get past the national championships, and then you have a better idea when you read all the analysis and so on. I mean, last season, we had these discussions, but everyone knew what was available. I had a fairly good idea in terms of Harley. If they're telling you that you're throwing a blanket over the top 10, then maybe it is better to split. That being said, you look through the drafts of the last 5 to 10 years, and it's the top 5 players that invariably end up being stars. And then it becomes a bit more hit and miss. It's very hard to get a player now, even in the top 10, that doesn't end up playing a lot of games at a very high level. And then it becomes a bit more hit and miss. So if you're going by that, no, you keep that pick, but we just don't know, do we, Drew? We just don't know what's available at the draft, what may be available later. And we've got a lot of gun youngsters now. So you bring in someone like that, it accelerates the development. And as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, you're going to do all you can to keep Harley, right? He's that much better than every other kid and will be for a couple of years. If you split that pick, bring Liam Baker in, Harley's happier because you're improving quicker, then you probably are in a better place overall.
Yeah, and I'm personally a big rat for that. I still think I'm still in the English camp. I know that you're sort of 50-50 on it. But if I'm leaning one way, I'm leaning towards how can we get better quicker, because we've got a generational talent who might win 5 Norm Smiths if we give him the chance. So how do we get there quicker, but also do it so we actually make it all the way to the top? And that's the thing, isn't it? So the other thing I was throwing up in my mind, Garby, was, if we split the first pick and we offer Adelaide pick 10 and Harry Barnett for Dan Curtin, and then we take a youngster with our other first round pick, is that something that you might like? Or is it split the pick and send pick 18 to the Western Bulldogs for Jed Buslinger and take the young Western Australian key back, and then draft someone with our first pick, or use the other one on Liam Baker? These are potential options for us.
I feel like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind right now, with the things just buzzing about on the, on the whiteboard. It's hard to keep track of all of that. Yeah, I mean, all sound like pretty sound options at the moment, but, how good is Buslinger and what will the Dogs go for? It's hard to know. There's a lot of hypotheticals there, but I mean, it's exciting. We'll be making some moves.
Yeah, well, just it seems like splitting that first pick is going to be the potential move. So
yeah, this season, I would say is likely.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. Baker, yes. I'm ticking off Baker. Graham, I'm saying no at this stage.
Yeah. I mean, we said this, if Jaden Hunt had been discussed now, we'd be saying no, right? But he's been an asset. So you never quite know.
Yeah, I just don't know if I want a slow midfielder. Does anyone really want a slow midfielder? Like we've got them.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone's got them. At least Jaden Hunt's offering us something different. So do you think, is it
the positive is he's a contest player, and that might just help our youngsters for a couple of years around the ball. I guess that's the argument.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So do you think this week, does Edwards go out? Does maybe Brockman have a rest? He's been pretty quiet. What do they look at selection? Obviously, Barras comes back probably for Harry Edwards, although Essendon do go quite tall. And then Reed's back. How do you think it all settles for us?
Harry was good, by the way, so we should mention that. He looked really good. I was happy for him that he came in, played well. We saw in his early stages that he had talent. Then he dropped off a lot with fitness and confidence issues, but he came in and looked good down back. So that was pleasing to see. But you'd think he probably drops out for Tommy. Harley comes in probably for Chesser, you feel. And Noah Long comes in probably for Luke Edwards. I mean, I guess those are the three changes, right? That's how I read it. Do you see anything different?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see True. So but
he's out with concussion. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So he can't actually play this week. He got concussed the Waffle didn't play, but he got concussed. He's out for at least the next week.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know that. I hadn't looked at the injury report from last night.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame. I would have liked to have seen him get a crack this week.
I think he will at some stage.
Yeah, I think that's the case for, most of the list. But we'll probably see Bergil at some point. We'll probably see Dewar. Baker might get a chance. Jordan Baker might get a chance later in the year. Like they're gonna spin the magnets through the team and get everyone in there and have a look at everyone. You would think.
Yeah, of course they will. They'll be giving them opportunities this week. Though it feels like those changes are the ones. I mean, Liam Ryan, he had that week to bed in. It feels like last week was a bit of that. Like, just get guys, give them a game under their belt. There might be weeks where they go, listen, it's not all about winning this week, like long-term vision. Harley gets rested. Luke Edwards comes straight back in. Liam Ryan comes in. All right, we may be sacrificing our chances of winning a touch, although that's the goal, and we started superbly. But long-term, we'll be better off. There'll be a bit of that management, I think, at times of where we're at right now. And then it sets you up this week to hopefully have a go and, okay, let's get that win. But, Flying looked good. He kicked a good goal late. He seems to be conditioned a bit better at the moment than he has been in the past. I mean, that's an all-Australian player we're bringing back in. He hadn't played a lot of footy prior to last week. So hopefully we see a bit more from him this week. But those changes feel like the ones for me.
Yeah, and there's no excuse for Ryan not to be conditioned. This isn't 2 years ago when everyone was injured or had COVID. If you're going to bring a player back, they've got to be fit and ready to go, that's the strength of the position that we're in right now compared to where we have been previously, which is why we've been extra competitive. So do you want to go through some of the listener stuff on Twitter? So
let's do it.
Nuffington Post, Chesser and L. Edwards need time in the waffle. We need to give opportunities to Hall, True, Johnston and Dewar. We're definitely going to see Hall, you'd think, soonish. I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll be in. He'll get some games. They all will at certain stages this season. So, yeah, and that's the other thing in the draft. Like, you get Clay Hall at a pick 38. Like, you can split the pick and find something a little bit later on that, we haven't seen Hall play yet, but it's generally that first top 5-10 that can be really good. But if you're throwing the blanket over them, then you split the pick and you bring in an experienced player and you can find something classy later on if there's no real standout early. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching him pretty soon.
You mentioned the way that all the tools shake down once Flynn's available again. Garby, Sam Phillips he's sort of brought that up. He said, would love your thoughts on how our talls look when Oscar and Flynn are back. You'd think two current talls will have to make way. Is it the beginning of the end for Jack Darling? So if you're naming our tall lineup with everyone fit, how does it work for you?
Ooh. I mean, Jack's been good the last month.
Yes.
But they've got to look to the future at some stage as well. So I'm thinking they're all up and going, and Oscar's 100% fit. You know, it's probably Oscar at centre half forward, Jake out of the square. You could rotate the two of them. Ryan Marrick's half forward as a link up, like your Jack Gunston type. And then Bailey Williams is there as well. I mean, that's arguably too tall already, right? He's your second ruck. They're looking to the future and they're happy with Marrick. I don't really see a place for Jack Darling later on in the season. That's hard to say because we celebrate him going past Suma now and what an achievement that is. We spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. That's been a big moment. They've got to kind of make that ruthless call and look to the future with him, I think, in the second half of the year.
Yeah, so for me, it's Marrick or Darling. So, yeah. And Darling played that role when he started. In his first season, he played that role beautifully, linking up further up the ground. And he was obviously, you know, athletically as a 19-year-old, that's a different proposition to what he is capable of now. But I think that's the role that he would have to play. Get up the ground, give us an outlet, give us a target, and then he can also, you know, he can use his physical traits and his experience closer to goal when required as well. But yeah, he's not going to be a walk-up start in the second half of the year. But also they may not always play two ruckmen. They might give Bailey a spell in the waffle, or Matt Flynn might come in for a few weeks and then have a week off, and then you rejig the team. There's a possibility of doing the whole horses for courses thing. But I love the idea of having a good look at Bailey as a forward. That's how he trained during the preseason. That's always something the club has wanted to explore, use his explosive leap, use his aerial ability, and he's got a long kick. So all of that is exciting as a forward. So that's what we want to have a look at that at some stage. So yes, that means that probably Darling is going to have to drop out of the team at some stage. Or if he keeps playing well, then, you know, Marrick shall have to spend some time. Ryan Marrick will have to spend some time in the waffle. That's absolutely fine. Just while I'm finding the next one, has Marrick shown enough in terms of defensive pressure and his work when the ball hits the ground to be a sort of a guaranteed walk-up star?
Yeah, probably not. He maybe needs to improve that aspect of his game. I think he'll get there. By the way, it was annoying that they're calling him Marich on the weekend.
Which I just did. Well, they thought it was Bailey Williams when he took that mark at the start.
I know. Did they fix it as the game wore on? It was annoying me a lot that I didn't want to listen to it anymore. I hope someone messaged him and said, listen, it's Marich, not Marich.
Well, it's so much so that it caused me to second guess it. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Marich.
Yeah. Maybe someone texted Hutto. Hutto's usually better than that. He's a legend. We all know that. We all make mistakes, of course, but that was annoying.
Ash Little said frustrated by fans that jumped straight back to being negative during the Suns game and after. This is who we are, up and down, good and bad, developing side. I think that's a good point, and that's sort of what we discussed earlier. We're not going to perform at the Western Derby level every single week.
No. But that's normal that fans expect that. Like, you know, I can cop that as well. We spoke about our experiences, and I think we need to chill as long as we're competitive every week and we're having a crack to win games more often than not, which I think we will do. That's okay. But if some fans are getting wound up, and that's part of their experience too, right? Like, we've all got different emotions and different expectations. The club's pretty level-headed on that. So I get what Ash is saying, and it's annoying when there's massive criticism coming through, but hey, people get wound up in different ways around footy games. I think most fans are pretty calm about where we're headed. I see his point, but different fans are going to act in different ways. Really
happy that Ron's has brought this up. She said, Yo's 200th this Saturday. How good is he going? There's been a lot of love for Elliot Yeo in the last few weeks. Everyone over this side of the country has remembered that this guy was an absolute superstar for a couple of years. And then, you know, his biggest critic has been Kane Corns, who's criticised him for not being fit enough and not being professional enough and all that sort of stuff, which is pretty, you know, hard to judge properly from the other side of the country. But now that he's over the groin injuries, he's properly fit and he's right now one of the best players in the comp. And it's a great opportunity that we get to not only celebrate his current form, but then also his 200th game. He's been a tremendous acquisition for the club.
2-time best and fairest winner, John Worsfold medalist, 2-time All-Australian, massive in our premiership year. Like, he's probably in the Eagles' best 22 of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in the side. I mean, that's a massive accolade. If you're, it's an opinion thing, but if the overwhelming view is that you're in, that's huge considering our history and the players we've had. I think he is somewhere. You speak to people like Adam Simpson, they'll say, he's our best player. Like, he just is. Probably in the All-Australian team at the moment. Whether he stays fit and maintains that, we'll have to wait and see, but fair chance. I think he's in the All-Australian team right now, which would be awesome. Yeah, Kane's, there are valid points there in that, well, why didn't Elliot Yeo explore what he did in the off-season earlier and put everything into getting his body right? I see that. But at the same time, sometimes your body also lets you down. I like Kane, but he also called us a graveyard club and Harley Reid shouldn't go there. He's had an agenda. We all know that. He's eating a bit of humble pie at the moment, I think.
He's changed his tune very quickly.
And I wrote on Twitter, we didn't get on this, but I wrote on Twitter straight after the Derby game, like, this whole Harley Reid single-handedly lifted the Eagles. That's been the biggest out for some of these critics, Drew, because they smashed the Eagles so much. They couldn't comprehend that we were back competitive and winning games so quickly. So they play that, it's all just Harley Reid. Play that card because they slammed so many of our players and slammed the club and the coaches and so on. No. It's not all Harley. He's had a huge impact. Don't get me wrong. Of course he has. But there are other guys who are fabulous footballers who have just got things right and young players who have lifted confidence-wise and so on. Don't just play that. We're not that stupid, right?
Yep.
You're not going to take us for fools. You can't just play that Harley Reid card and, do it that way. We're not going to fall for that. So I found that really interesting after the Derby win.
Yeah, well, it's overlooking the fact that Adam Simpson's done a great job at getting the team together and the development coaches have helped and the fitness staff and Matty Innes and everyone that's come in is doing a great job. And probably right now, McGovern, Yeo and Waterman would all be in the All-Australian team, certainly in the squad. The way Harley's going, he'll be in the All-Australian squad. So there's more than just Harley, which we know. Elliot Yeo, one of my favourite players to watch. Get the feeling that he would have been really annoying to have as a good friend when you were young. Like, he would have been good at everything. He's probably like smashes it, 300 down the middle when he's playing golf. He could probably bowl quick and hit a big ball playing cricket. He could have been an All-Australian defender, All-Australian midfielder. Probably if you put him at full forward, he'd kick 50 goals. He's just a talented player and so athletically gifted. And I love, I think Gov mentioned it yesterday about how angry he gets on the field and that he gives direct feedback. And I kind of love that. I think we saw the bad side of it. Maybe was it last year? But it always looks worse when you're losing. But I think having someone like him out there when we're trying to improve with young players and lift the standards, especially when he's playing so well, I think is a good thing. So 200, great get for us from Brisbane. Obviously, that was a bad time for the Lions losing a lot of players, but it worked well for us. Good East Freo boys. Daniel Brooker, thoughts on our game style? Our one wood in the wins was contested ball. This is labour intensive, and it looked like we needed another avenue to win the ball once we lost the hit-outs against the Suns. Apart from Flynn getting back ASAP, what other things could we implement to help B-Will?
Well, there's not much, unfortunately. Like, I just think it needed Ruben Jimby to have a bigger game. Brockman, if he goes in there to do a little bit more, that didn't really happen. So unfortunately, I don't think there's much. Like, we don't have that many options when Harley Reid's out of the team. So that's where we're at. I think Daniel's making a really good point, but it's not like we have a plethora of options available in that sense.
Yeah, I like the insight that Daniel's brought in terms of thinking about the tactics in the centre square, but I think we'll see a different setup with Harley back this week. Shohan Khan, he's more of a comment. He said, enjoying watching West Coast again, worth waking up overseas in the UK to tune in, unlike the last two seasons. Kids and veterans turning up and giving it a crack, not rolling over, even if the game is done. Just need to stay patient and let Simo build. Agree with that. Blair says Chesser needs a rest or the rest of 2024 in the waffle. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that, Blair, but he might need a spell in the twos just to get some confidence back. Where are you? How hot or cold are you on Chess at the moment?
Yeah, I spoke about him before. I think there's a player there, but he just needs to fight through the down moments in games a bit more. You know, when his confidence drops a little bit and he hasn't got as much of the footy, just get in there and fight a bit more. You know, if you're not quite at it, you know, get in there and make a big tackle or a big chase. Those aspects of his games, I think, to get him involved in the contest need to happen a bit more. There's a fear that it's a bit of downhill skiing stuff, like we're up and going and looking good, and then Chess gets on the end of a couple and kicks a goal in the square and we see his run. No, when the chips are down, Chess, that's when you need a fight.
Yep.
And maybe we're not seeing enough of that from him right now, and that's probably the area he needs to live.
Just really quickly, we're on the clock here, Garby. One thing I've just reflected on the last week or so with Harley going back to Tongala and seeing the family having a week off. Do you think that's smart from West Coast to give him a bit of flexibility with his schedule and allow him to stay connected with home while he's living in WA?
Yeah, I dare say there was a plan for him. I don't mind it. It's big picture stuff. There's also, they're talking about a contract renewal. You know, they're looking at securing the kid. Winning against Gold Coast or keeping Harley Reid for another year right now, what would you prefer? I mean, I know what I'd prefer. So if they feel as though that's the best strategy for him, off field, on field, then great. They're closer to it. You back the club in that sense. They made all the right moves with him so far. Can't wait to see him back on Saturday night doing his thing. I reckon he'll be so pumped for it. I reckon Essendon fans are extremely apprehensive about the game because of that and because of the way we're playing. Doesn't mean we're going to win, but I reckon we're a good chance. Hopefully we got the jackets out waving them. Would love to beat the Bombers. Dislike them more than Carlton and Collingwood. That's saying something.
I don't like the Bombers. I think we'll win. I think it's going to be a cracking game. Enjoy it.
Yeah. Can't wait. Thanks, Drewy. Go Eagles.